I just love to hear more about your story, because I know that your trajectory wasn't always to do nonprofit work. You were in marketplace work. And I just love to hear a bit of your story of even how your walk with Jesus became so central to your life, and how you found yourself on the trajectory you're on right now.
Yes. I exhale because the way I would describe my journey at this point is that there was this convergent of these moments and markers in my life that
Hmm.
all appear to be isolated and somewhat fragmented at the time, until I crossed this threshold that was related to my calling into ministry, and now my calling to I steward the ministry of compassion, that I can understand the intentional shaping journey that I was on every step of the way, and my husband and my family as well. But part of my journey, Jason, one of the markers would be I went to Youth with a Mission as a young adult shortly after high
Where did you end
school.
up doing your mission?
Yeah, well, first of all, I suffered for Jesus at the first part of my DTS in Honolulu, Hawaii. So
Okay. Okay.
that's where the first part was. But the second was in Chiang Mai, Thailand. That's where we did our
Wow.
outreach. And so I spent several months there. And so, this experience for me was a significant shaping in understanding God's mission, in understanding the state of the world. It was at the turn of the century where we were hearing about these things called Millennium Development Goals, which to me seemed really kind of far off and out there. But as I, engaged in outreach in Chiang Mai, Thailand, I was confronted with things like extreme poverty and injustice, with child slavery, child labor, and that all of a sudden these big realities were really front and center for me. And I remember what I didn't know at the time is that there was an organization called Compassion who was there and who's already working. And I had this sense in me of like, God was certainly planting a seed of calling me to be an advocate for kids and the
Hmm.
poor. Um, but as I left Thailand, I'm going, well, this whole thing can't be dependent on me and people like me, because we're there for a season and then we're leaving. And so what does that look like? And again, that was just a seed that was planted that would be picked up a lot later in life when I realized that the church was alive and well there. Compassion
Hmm.
was partnering with the church who was, working on holistic child development, helping kids spiritually, socially, physically, and cognitively in their own communities. Um, Fast forward, I ended up meeting my husband there at Youth with a Mission.
I
And
think you're probably the only people
yeah, that's
in
not a
YWAM's
thing,
history
right?
that met. Yeah.
No, and I certainly never went wondering or hoping that that would happen to me, but sure enough, it did. Um, but what brought my husband and I together was this shared passion for mission, and this shared passion to be advocates for the poor and the marginalized.
Hmm.
And but that didn't happen right away. And for a variety of reasons, life set in.
Hmm.
We got jobs. We started a family. We bought a house and did all that kind of up and to the right and slow and steady and secure kind of life decisions until about a decade into our marriage, when things started to change for us.
And take me to that point. What was that catalyst that began to shift?
Yeah. So there were two realities at the time. There was the conversation that our church was having and how
Hmm.
that was shaping my own thought life and thinking on what it means to live on mission and to really steward every aspect of my life. There was a verse that God really tucked in our heart at the time as a couple and as a family, which was Luke 12:48, which says, "To whom much is given, much is required, and to whom much is entrusted, even more will be asked." And I became to realize that we had been entrusted with a lot. So at that point, I had a successful career in the finance industry. We had a depth of community in our church. We had family. We had a beautiful home that we had renovated. Beyond that, we had time and health and talent and access and voice and influence, all of these things that I didn't quite acknowledge or realize at the time. So that was one of the paths, which I can talk more about in a moment. On the personal side of things, there was a moment in time shortly after the birth of my second daughter. So I have two daughters, by the way. One is 11 and one is 8 now. But at the time, one was just over 2 and one was a couple months old. And I was sitting in the basement of our home with my husband and my two daughters. And my oldest was playing in the distance, and I was holding our newborn. And I just became undone, just overwhelmed with emotion. And there was this pit in my stomach, like somehow we were missing it, missing the reason that God created us, missing the reason that he had brought us together as a couple. And I was, reminded again and afresh of this calling that he placed on us when we met at YWAM, of this conviction level seed that he planted in my heart to be an advocate for kids and the poor. And God planted a question in my heart in that season, which was, what about the rest of them? Allison, you are working so hard to provide your kids everything they could ever need and more than they could ever want, while quite frankly, completely ignoring the needs of other moms and families around the world that want their kids to just survive and never mind thrive in the way that we wanted for our kids. And so it set us on this path of just opening up our hands and our hearts again to say, God, we sense that now is the time to step out of the boat, was the language we would have used, the boat that we had created that was secure and comfortable, full of satisfaction. And we were stepping forward in new ways to say, God, we don't know exactly what this next step looks like, but we're choosing to trust you. We're choosing that you will make our paths clear, but we're saying we want to be all about your mission and not ours. And that led us on a path, first of all, of putting a for sale sign up in our house and recognizing that God was calling us to walk away from that life that we had built. And then we really, Jason, just took one faithful step as a family, and that was to sponsor one child, a little boy named Jimmy from Ecuador, through an organization that I had only just been introduced to by our church called Compassion Canada. And our lives radically changed from that point on.